On today's show, we're going to be talking about a few mature topics. So if you have little ones nearby, you may want to listen to this at a different time. I am so happy to be joined by Kristen Jenson. She is the founder of Defend Young Minds, and I'm kind of sad but happy to have her. This is the reason I'm sad that we need to have these conversations, but I'm really happy that she has given us what we need to talk to our kids about some hard subjects. Today, we're going to talk about pornography and her books, her children's books, both for kids and like older kids, and then the junior version, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Many of you are already familiar with that, over 380,000 copies sold. And today, we're talking about her newest book that's just for girls, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Guide for Girls, How I Stay Safe, Smart, and Confident. Kristen, welcome back to the Happy Home Podcast.
Thank you so much, Arlene. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start here. Why girls? Why did you decide, hey, you know what? There's a need here. What was that need, and why did you decide to do it?
Well, it's been a long time in coming because over 10 years ago, we started having conversations with women who had been addicted to pornography, various kinds of pornography. Maybe it started with romance novels. Maybe it ended up in video. Maybe it was with hentai, which is anime porn. But this is 10 years ago. They had been, they had been exposed as children. And then that interest sparked more curiosity.
Yeah.
And where there was no talking to them, nobody was telling them anything. Nobody was warning them. It led to, with some of them, very long-term addictions, and even them acting out on younger children, family members, cousins. And so some very severe consequences. And this was 10 years ago. And I started talking to women, and then I had parents coming to me saying, could you make a girls version? Because, I want to read this to my daughter, and I have, but it would really be good if she saw girls, having this conversation with their mom, not just boys.
Yeah.
And so I started in that way, basically seeing the problem, hearing about it firsthand from women who had been addicted. And to be honest, when I heard, I was a little surprised too. I had believed that pornography was just a guy problem and not a human problem.
And that's a hurdle for us to realize that, okay, this could be our son or our daughter. I really like how in the book you talk about that it's not just videos, it's not just images, it could be things that we're reading, and that the images that we're making up in our own mind, because that's a huge thing. And we don't talk about that. The whole romance novels, and we don't think when we have a book next to us that that's pornography. But you very rightly point out that it certainly can be. And that's a good thing to alert girls to.
Absolutely. And books will teach the same toxic messages of pornography that the videos will. And again, it creates those pictures in the mind, teaches those toxic messages of objectification, and really disempowerment for girls. And we have to begin these conversations because we cannot protect girls by leaving them out of the conversation.
Yeah. Your book is, for what age would be the ideal age for a mom to read this with her daughter?
Well, I could see reading this with a girl as young as 7 and on up to 12. Although I've already had people say, I'm going over this with my teenage girls. Yeah. Because it points out so clearly the objectification issues, and also the issues with some of this. Now, I'm not opposed to romance novels. I just finished reading 3 of them that were very clean.
Yes, right.
I understand. And I think I've had my fill for a while, but I mean, they're not my favorite genre, but I have read them. And I see their appeal for girls because we are interested in relationships and
Yes.
falling in love. And
Yeah.
we're very, that's sweet and that's
Right.
natural and normal. But what pornography does is take what is beautiful and natural and normal and spin it,
Yeah.
180 degrees to where it's toxic, where it's poisons, where it's violence, and where it's really harmful.
Yeah.
And it does the same thing in a story form that girls, it's packaged for them. It's
Yes.
become packaged for them. And so our girls have become much more vulnerable to being pulled into pornography. And I'll say one more thing, Arlene.
Yeah.
They will start maybe with some stories, but where they end up can be a totally different place. They can easily
Yeah.
end up looking at the video, the hardcore, and being and having that addiction process begin.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about how to have these conversations with our older girls, maybe, and even younger girls. Before we get there, what I love about the book is it's something you can read alongside. So it takes all the awkward out instead of thinking, okay, I'm a mom and I need to have this conversation with my daughter, but I have no idea what to say. And I don't know how to define objectification. Like, I don't know how to do these things. And you take all the guesswork out and you make it this story where this mom and this daughter are talking together. So kudos on that, because that's so, so good. Let's talk about this. Some moms will say, and dads, I don't want to introduce this to my daughter because she's so innocent, right? I don't want to be there too early. And yet we can see in research, like, hey, it is not too early because girls are getting these messages really soon. What would you say to that parent who says, like, I want to keep my child innocent?
I totally understand that need. I have two daughters myself, and I totally understand why we want to protect their innocence.
Yeah.
But this is the paradox or the irony that the more you teach them and the more you warn them and give them tools to reject pornography,
Yeah.
the more they protect their own
It's
innocence.
so good.
And I'll tell you, there was a 11-year-old girl. Her mother had read her good pictures, bad pictures. She had this information. She knew what it was. She knew it was harmful, and she knew what to do when she saw it. And she was sitting next to a friend on a school bus, and they were going to a field trip. And another student came up, showed them pornography on a phone, and the 11-year-old that had been warned, she was like, no, not gonna look at that. The other girl, though, continued to look. So
Yeah.
let me ask you that.
Yeah.
Which of those two girls are going to protect their innocence and are going to be safer from that influence?
Yeah.
It's the one that had been warned,
Yes.
not the one that was caught off guard.
Oh, it's so good. It's that idea that whoever gets there first gets to put the worldview in. So if you as the parent get to show, like, hey, there are parts of the body is created beautifully by God. It's wonderful, but there are parts of it that are private and should not be shown. And if you're ever shown this, you need to look away, and you can tell a trusted adult you're not going to get in trouble, right? You've had that conversation, and that this is harmful. This will hurt you. Those are private things that shouldn't be shown. Then that girl goes into all those situations thinking that, versus if you never have that conversation and the first thing she gets about this is that field trip and looking at it, then of course she's going to be curious, and then she's going to be ashamed, and then she's not going to want to talk about it and all those things. So I think what you have done through the picture books is just phenomenal to give parents, to let them say, let's be the first. Okay. So the tagline on the book is how to stay safe, smart, and confident. And it's a heavy topic, but let's just get excited a little bit that your daughter, because you're listening to this, may be safe and smart and confident. Speak to that, like what you have seen when kids are prepared.
Absolutely. Well, let me just take one step back first.
Yeah.
when a parent, a mom, is reading this book to her daughter, it is normalizing these conversations, right? It
Yeah.
is showing a mom being proactive, right? So
Yeah.
it's helping that mom because it's modeling that. And it's okay to talk about it. There's no shame in talking about pornography. Pornography is shameful, but
Yeah.
there's no shame in talking about it. But going back to how it's going to help your daughter be safe, smart, and confident. First of all, there are multiple and more studies that show that girls that view pornography get into sex earlier and they engage in much riskier sexual acts. They accept sexual violence more readily as normal, right? Because that's what pornography does.
That's
It
what they've
normalizes
seen.
sexual violence. And so the safety of children, also, pornography is a grooming tool of predators. And it's, my opinion, is the number one grooming tool because
Yeah.
why wouldn't it be? And there, I have multiple stories of children who were read good pictures, bad pictures. Then a predator actually approached them, showing them pornography, and then they absolutely turned away. They knew exactly what to do, and they saved themselves.
Mm.
So if you want to keep your daughter a little safer from
Yeah.
a hands-on direct sexual abuse situation, definitely warn her about pornography.
Yeah.
And then smart. And there's also a lot of well, we want to keep her smart by having her understand how the brain works, right?
Yeah.
And how the brain can become addicted to pornography as well as other things, right? We
Right.
live in a world that's just awash with addictive behaviors. So understanding how the brain becomes addicted and how we can keep the brain from becoming addicted, that is really, really important. That helps her stay smart. But there's some really interesting studies that show that girls that are hyper, like, concerned
Yeah.
about their appearance, right, and
Yeah.
focus a lot on that, they actually have cognitive delays. So, let's help our daughters be smart
Mm.
and move beyond that. I have no problem. Obviously, I
Yeah.
put a little lipstick on myself,
Right. Right.
but that's not what we're talking
It
about. We're
wasn't 2
talking about this,
hours. It wasn't 2 hours in front of a mirror. It
and it
wasn't
wasn't
being worried.
$200 of
Yes.
products, but then confident, pornography and other sexualized uh, material content on social media, etc., really starts to chew away and gnaw at a girl's self-confidence. Because what is she? She becomes an object. She becomes something that's commodified, something
Yeah.
to be used. Um, and all of that eats away at your confidence.
Yeah.
Because what are you valued for? Only for how you look, only for how hot you are.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if that's the only thing you're valuing yourself, then most of us are going to fail abysmally at that one.
Yes.
So I think that in those ways, we want to protect our children, our
Yeah.
girls, and keep them safe, smart, and confident.
We're going to go to the brain in a moment, but I just think, like, when you go into a high-end store and everything's really beautiful, and then you look at your clothes and you're like, oh my word, I look ridiculous. You look at your makeup, it's wrong. Everyone looks so beautiful. And no matter how self-confident you are, you just crumble. And we just need to be so careful with our girls as they're scrolling through social media and they're seeing all these looks of what beauty is, and then pornography taking that even a step further, that it's just so, so dangerous for girls. And all of us, any of us, would compare ourselves like that. You touched on the objectification, so teaching, just help us, it's a big word. So let's say we were talking to an 8-year-old, how would we talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the book, I have the mother use various examples. She starts with, like, the soccer ball that they're kicking around, and they're
Yeah.
like, this ball, we can kick it, it's not going to be hurt,
Yeah.
right?
It's a thing.
But if you kick a person's going to be hurt, not only physically, but probably maybe even emotionally, right? So kicking is so different. But so when you make people into objects, you can easily hurt them and not feel bad about it. And that's totally what pornography does. These mostly women, I would say, are objects. And there's so much sexual violence now in pornography. That's pretty much all it is. And so it's so important that we teach about objects. So I talk about various, incidents of that they can kind of relate to.
Yeah.
And we also talk a little bit about, using other people. Like, what about one of the examples is, what about if there's a girl and she dresses really nice and she wears all the latest styles? And the only reason you want to get to know her and the only reason you want to be her friend is so that you can be more popular. Isn't that a form of objectification?
Yeah.
Because truly, she doesn't mean anything but being a mannequin, basically. She's really just being a mannequin. So we just talk about things that they can relate to,
Yeah.
but it goes deeper and it can open up these deeper conversations about objectification. But, objectification is not strong enough a word. I wish it were stronger.
Right.
Because it's inhumane objectification. Those two words should, it takes our humanity away. It strips away our humanity. The skills, the talents, the kindness, the whatever makes you, that becomes just stripped away, and you're only this one thing that it's very difficult to achieve. So I feel like we do a pretty good job in the book. I do a pretty, of explaining objectification. We shouldn't be afraid of these big words. I talked to my kids when they were growing up using big words, and guess what happened?
Right. They understood them.
They actually had a large vocabulary by the time they were in high school. So it's all good. Kids are smarter than we think.
They are. It's so true. So I want to go back to the brain, because you so beautifully explain what the thinking brain and the feeling brain and the differences. So in light of pornography, help us communicate that to our kids. And I think it's so helpful to use this language about the brain, because even if a teenager thinks you're crazy and old-fashioned and too radical and all these things, she will want to protect her brain. So this is a good place to have a conversation.
Yeah. And kids love science, and they like learning about their bodies and about their brains. So yes, we talk about the thinking brain and the feeling brain. And this is obviously very simplified, but I've had neurosurgeons and very smart people look at this and they're all like, this is good.
Yeah.
So we need to teach children they have these two brains, and they're both very important, critical, absolutely necessary. However, as they grow, they need to keep their thinking brain in charge, because their feeling brain makes decisions without knowing right and wrong, without remembering past consequences. It just goes on survival and what it wants. But it's kind of like, an animal going after a predator going after prey. They don't sit around going, well, is that really ethical, that I eat this fish for my dinner? But as humans, we have that ability to use our thinking brain to consider our decisions and to make good choices. The problem with pornography and other addictive substances and behaviors is that your feeling brain hijacks your thinking brain, so that you're not actually proactively saying, oh, is this right or wrong? Oh, is this going to be good or bad? Oh, should I do this or not? And we know that as children grow older, they gain more impulse control. They start to, be able
Yeah.
to make better and better decisions. But they need to understand that, unfortunately, addictions take that all away for the most part. If you've known somebody who is addicted to whatever,
Yeah.
or if you struggle yourself, you will know that it's difficult. We've heard in the news of various high profile politicians and celebrities, whatever, that maybe sent a picture that they should not have sent, right? A private picture they should not have sent, and they're caught. And we're thinking, what were they thinking?
They're
right?
an adult. Yes.
What were they thinking? Didn't they know they could ruin their entire career? But they weren't thinking because their feeling brain just wanted to do it and did not consult their thinking brain. So we simplify the science so that a child can understand it. But I've had so many parents tell me, I didn't know this. I learned a lot about addiction. And so what better way to make a child smarter than to give them a little bit of a better understanding of how their brain actually responds to this kind of material.
And this is why I'm such an advocate of delaying smartphone use, like John Haidt would say 16, social media, et cetera. I like to say 18 because the kid's brain doesn't know, the kid is like 8 or 10 or 12, they're not thinking my thinking brain should really kick in right now because my feeling brain is curious about that. So parents, we sometimes have to be the thinking brain when our child is really predominantly only feeling brain.
Absolutely. That's part of our job, is to be their prefrontal cortex.
Yes. Yeah.
We have to be. That's our job. And I am absolutely right there with you. To delay social media, it snuck up on us.
It did.
Yeah. That doesn't mean we can't now, with our improved knowledge, pull it back and throw it out the door for a while.
I love that. I love it. Let's pull it back and throw it out. I love this. Okay, my last question for you. Let's say that the mom is listening, but their child is older, or maybe they read Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Guide for Girls, and then they realize, oh my goodness, my daughter has already been exposed to pornography. What does that conversation, how could it sound like?
Well, that's a conversation that's happened many times from what I've heard, because maybe we didn't even know we needed to have this conversation this early, and especially with girls. We have it, and then, she feels safe enough to say, well, actually, I have seen something like this. And it's so important to make it a safe place that she doesn't fear that you're going to rip everything away from her and she'll get in trouble, or she'll be so ashamed. There's a couple of things that come to mind. First of all, we do have a guide on Defend Young Minds that is called "My Kid Saw Porn, Now What?" And it's more like an ebook. It's like 88 pages. But it goes through a 5-step plan called the SMART plan, and then answers individual, specific questions. There are therapists that have answered these questions and everything. So
we'll put a link. We'll put a link of that on our show notes.
But basically, when you find this out, I would say remain calm. That is the main thing, because once you show a ton of emotion, it's going to be scary for the kid. And I think if we can go into it going, oh, okay, you've seen this. All righty. Thank you for telling me. Yeah. Thank you for telling me. We're going to work at this together. I'm going to be there with you to help you. And So knowing that porn is the enemy, your child is not the enemy, right? Even if they were curious, even if they looked at, there's just nothing we can blame our kids. If we haven't started that conversation, we can't blame them for being vulnerable to what the world is throwing at them.
Yeah.
We have a grandchild who, I'll tell you, when it comes to food, he has a hard time. If he wants something, and so we just, the things that we know he's going to be very tempted by if we're having a family dinner. Guess what? Those desserts, they go way up on top of the refrigerator. They go up on a top
The
shelf.
bar is too heavy for him to press.
For him. Yes. He's a little guy right now. He's tall for his age. That's the problem. But we've realized, if we set up the environment so that he can succeed, then we're going to avoid a lot of these problems. But the problem is it is difficult to set up that environment, to control that environment. That's why we have to have these conversations early and often to help our girls know that they can come and talk to us.
Yeah.
They're not bad kids. They're not bad kids, but pornography is bad for them.
Yeah. You can feel the difference of that child's going to return to a parent that says, thank you so much for telling me this, versus what, right? Big, or tears and I can't believe this, or, oh my, all those things. So we do have to save that, pretend to be like, okay, thank you. And then later to your friends, to your spouse, to, your support group, you can freak out then, but do not freak out in front of your child.
Freak out in private. And you have time to consider what you want to do. Let's say you even find that your child, your daughter, whatever, has been searching for things that she shouldn't have or whatever. I would really take 24 to 72 hours to think about it, to prepare, to plan your response. There's no reason why you have to just immediately react to this situation. Much better to hold off. And let me tell you, I am not one of these people. I'm a little hot. I run a little hot in my, I get it. My father, when I was really young, called me Eric the Red. And if you know what that means, I did not know what that meant until I was studying with my kids, reading some book about Eric the Red. I'm like, oh, he was named that because he had this hot, kind of temper. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get it. I am there with those women that react and have emotions right at the surface. But it is so much better to be calm. That is the ideal. And if you do have a reaction, come back and apologize and just say, we're going to have a calm conversation about this, and I'm going to do better at this. It's just that I want your life to be happy and I want you to be healthy. So yes, remain calm and then begin to know, how are you going to set up the discipline? How are you going to set up, because there should be discipline involved if, again, you've set up rules and they've broken them. It's okay to discipline them, but it's not okay to discipline them, to punish them, to shame them when they were blindsided.
Yeah. That good, loving discipline that is firm, but given in such a way that the child can receive it, right? So there's none of that shame or anything like that.
And so I know you love them.
Yeah. And I love how you are so calm, you talk so calmly, right? But I love that you're Eric the Red inside, because how else would Defend Young Minds exist if you were not Eric the Red inside?
I know. Makes me so mad.
Tell people how they can.
You. Yeah. And since I've had my grandsons, I am just it just makes me furious that it's out there.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about them seeing it, but yet we've been reading these books to them since they were 2. Yeah. So, trying to do this, this part of the of the preparation.
Yeah.
But yeah, Defend Young Minds is kind of like our companion website. We have free guides there. We have guides that are very specific topics that parents are all going to have to tackle as they raise their daughters and their children. So, we have great articles there. And we'd love to have you come and join us at Defend Young Minds. Also
so
on
many good
Instagram.
resources. Yeah.
Yep. Instagram and Facebook and all the socials. Yep.
So check that out. We will have that link in the show notes. Defend Young Minds. The book is called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Guide for Girls. Kristen, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Arlene.